So as we're getting ready to begin, I have a cute poll that I would like for you all to take so that I can know exactly where you are in your organizational life, as well as if you're an introvert or an extrovert, because I want to make sure that I'm speaking to everyone. So please go ahead and take the poll and then press submit. Okay, so thank you very much. Welcome this morning. We are here to discuss building power platforms, and I'm your host. My name is Regina Jackson, and I'm President and CEO of the East Oakland Youth Development Center. I am really excited to talk to you in this format because Generation Thrive has been in the making for about a year and a half, and it's virtual toolkits that are being provided to both nonprofits and to teachers are hopefully going to provide some extraordinary resources to help you all do your job even better. So with no further ado, I want to thank Nicole Lacob, who is the president of the Warriors Foundation, and Ayanna Moody for directing Generation Thrive and getting us to this place today. I also need to thank, excuse me, Annalise and Adil for being my superstar tech team. They just navigated a little emergency for me, and that was great. So now, in terms of setting context, I want you to know that power is yours. It's yours to manage, it's yours to build. And power is a real assistance tool in your entire career. So we're going to go to the first slide, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the East Oakland Youth Development Center. Pre-COVID, our programs focused on the 4 buckets of careers, education, wellness, and art. And while we're in COVID, we are still focusing on those same 4 buckets. When we talk about being in nonprofit careers, I want you to understand that power is not just your funder. Power is your colleagues. Power is your target audience and how you engage them. So in terms of context, I know we entered 2020 with all the hope in the world. And on March 13th, we had this amazing town hall on gun violence with the Golden State Warriors players and the coaches and Gabby Giffords. And we had this amazing TV coverage. And then by March 16th, along with the Oakland Unified School District, we shut down and sheltered in place. Now, the first 2 weeks, we were basically kind of stunned, right? Pivoting to an entirely virtual space. And quite frankly, we thought it was going to be over in about 4 to 6 weeks. And then on Easter Day, April 5th, our whole world upended. Our board president, Terry Blanchard, died of COVID-related illness. And all of a sudden, it became very real. So, in terms of talking about the concept of building a power platform, it's actually all about social capital, bonding, bridging, and linking. You're typically bonding with your funders, you're bonding with your target audience, and in bridging, you're kind of trying to figure out what that partnership or what that engagement is going to look like. And then in linking, usually those concepts are a little further away. It's like, oh, I want to have Google funding, but I don't know anybody there. And so you're reaching out to try and figure out, who is it that I need to connect with in order to build a relationship, in order to get some money? So the health of your relationship is really an important context. And so what I want to do is move to the next slide, and let's talk about health. So I tried to put a little kind of report card together. It's not on the screen. It was rough. And when I look at like the health check-in, it's kind of how does my organization present, before I can even start developing that relationship. So you have to have your paperwork in place. Your paperwork is, your business license. It's your GuideStar profile. It's your audits. It's whatever your organizational messaging is. It's your outcomes. And when you look at your health, how often are you in fact engaging with your funders? So if I use EOYDC as an example for this quote unquote nonprofit report card, an A is considered that we're an expert in the field and we actually educate the funder. A B is that you have good knowledge and you have connection to the funder. A C is satisfactory reporting and you do enough to get the funding. And then D is sometimes you don't meet your outcomes and you may be at risk of losing funding. So in using EOYDC as an example, our GuideStar rating is platinum. Now the range of ratings, you start with silver and then a series of questions go in and you can move up to gold, and platinum at this point is the highest rating. In terms of our audits, those are on time. In terms of our outcomes, they are very clearly expressed. And in terms of our org messaging, we have a variety of ways that we are communicating with our funder. So it's not that we're picking up the cell phone. It's how are you following up on emails or pushing out messages? Do you have a newsletter? Are you connected to your funders on LinkedIn or in social media? In my humble opinion, I feel like we connect with our funders probably quarterly. And some of that is just through the normal messaging of our posts. Other times it's around a progress report. Other times you're responding to an email, a request to meet, whether it's on the phone or virtually or in person. And how you engage increases the level of health, right? Or increases your potential grade if you're looking at a report card. So yesterday, I had a face-to-face meeting with Southwest. Now, this is a very new person, and she was trying to connect because several people had retired. And I don't have a problem meeting face-to-face. I practice social distancing and all that, but it was actually important to her. And so sometimes we can be uncomfortable these times, with these face-to-face entities. But I did it because it meant the difference to her around how comfortable she was in her position. And that builds your capital when a funder can be kind of reliant on you. And of course, the more that they rely on you for knowing your own expertise, they will also begin to ask you questions about other things. And the more dependable you are to that funder, the more your social capital increases. So health is something that you want to look at under a microscope. What are you doing? You know, after I've mentioned this checklist of GuideStar and all of that, you know, take a look in the mirror and figure out when some funder reaches out to you, how long does it take for you to respond? How open are you to communicating? Are you making connections? So for example, sometimes funders will call and you'll have this call set up and they ask you how you're doing. Well, sometimes you're not just fine. But I've had a car accident about a month ago. And on a couple of calls, you know, I said, hey, I'm doing well. I'm recovering from a car accident. And then the conversation goes to, oh my goodness, car accident. We talk a little bit about it and you begin sharing. Or maybe you're asking your funder, hey, how are you doing with this, you know, sheltering in place? And sometimes they'll share with you that they've got kids or, you know, other kinds of challenges. And that's how you really build a relationship. So when you look at opportunities for funding, when we started with COVID, I mentioned that we were just kind of stunned and thought that it was going to be like 4 to 6 weeks. And then it kept going. And I received a call from a fellow colleague, Mark Spencer of Summer Search, and he asked me how I was doing. And we had a conversation about what he was doing, applying for PPP, the Payroll Protection Program. And I told him, hey, I'm sending out emails to the funders. And he's like, yeah, we've been doing that too. And if you send out kind of a group email with a statement that you've already built out, you know, here's what we're doing and here's what we need. Next slide, please. So I talked about sending this email to funders. At the time, we talked about the fact that we were planning to do some grab and goes, which meant that we still were providing resources and support in person to some of our funders, to some of our clients. But that we'd set up emergency funds for our college students. And we were really trying to give them a role to play. And many of the funders actually said, hey, we can help. You know, we're setting up a COVID fund. You know, what do you need? We'll make it general operations, what have you. And so they were very flexible out of the gate. I'd say that 70 to 80% were just like really flexible. They're like, here's some money. And some folks were given $10,000 and $15,000, and others were adding another zero to it, 100,000, 150,000. Now, that's not because of COVID. That's because you have developed a relationship. And so, you know, while those tools work for any leader, the work that had been done pre-COVID is what helped get me through the first couple of months. Because this pandemic, there's no best practice. We're all kind of making it up as we go. And so the funder is just like salivating and understanding, how are you navigating this? What are you doing? And they wanted to understand our CDC protocols. They wanted to understand everything. And then when you look at continuing to build social capital, some of these funders were asking questions that didn't have very much to do with the organization, as much as it was, well, how are you taking care of yourself as a leader? Or the fact that they were intrigued that I had this other job, which was the police commission. And or who else are you talking to? This is your colleagues, right? And so in terms of the communication to the email, we talked about supporting our staff, our students, and our families. And we requested lots of calls, you know, one-on-one, Zoom, cell, whatever it was, to share our needs and our concerns. And that was the first Hail Mary. funders should be asking you what you think about concepts, what you think maybe about other organizations in the field, new initiatives. You should be helping them understand that you know what you're doing and it's a credible investment in you and your leadership that's going to get them the outcomes that they need to substantiate their work. So if they aren't asking you to like sit on panels, maybe to brief their board of directors, host meetings, well, at least pre-COVID host meetings, or even lead guided tours through your neighborhood so they can get a sense of what challenges you face where you're serving, then you have to build up your relationship more. And again, you know, COVID is crazy right now. But the point is that it's never too early to deepen your relationship. Because I know that we got some funding just on the strength of our reputation. How often do you put out newsletters? What is your social media game? You know, you are building relationship every time a message goes out that they might see. And when you reach out and they respond, share personal attributes around the things you're excited about. You know, tell them a few stories. Get to know what they get excited about. And that's how you kind of solidify connections. Excuse me. So back to relationship, I want to pivot a little bit. And let's go to the next slide. What role do you want them to play? Normally, in a crisis, it's kind of like you tell me what you need and then I'll figure out if I can support it. But what also has happened during COVID is that we've been pulled in to some other groupings, groups of fellow colleagues in the work. One is Brotherhood of Elders, and that's like a 60 or 70 profession network that meets every 2 weeks. Come to find out, not only are they experts in all the fields, education, art, health, and they developed this rapid response program. But then that organization, that group of people also became a funder. And they created a COVID response. And so by virtue of the fact that we're colleagues and in the work, there were opportunities for nonprofits to apply for money. So again, that power principle is not just relegated to funders. You have power that you build with your colleagues as well. And then you're also learning on the front line what is going on all around you. And that kind of information is incredibly important, not just for yourself, but when you are talking to people that you are trying to engage in support. So for example, I'm a little bit of a risk taker. So over time, I have often made our organization available previously to be a fiscal agent for individuals who were looking to, I don't know, showcase events or present artwork or what have you. Now, there's not a lot of money in serving as a fiscal agent, and so a lot of people don't do it. But what I wanted to do is create kind of a lifeline for individuals who had skill sets but could not create that kind of support system for themselves. And even that was noticed by a funder that we hadn't previously had. And then that person reached out and said, hey, I want to support you. I want to give you some money from my president's fund, because supporting individual artists is really important. And the fact that you're doing it because it's really just kind of the right thing to do, you can't make money off of it. I like how you're thinking. So again, this then deepens the power base to a values-driven kind of proposition. And that's all about letting people get to know you by how you move. And so when you ask the funder, or when the funder says, what can I do to help you? You always want to have a list, always. So at another point, when the city of Oakland reached out to me, and out of the blue really, and they said, hey, we are supporting frontline organizations in Oakland, and we'd like to talk with you about our idea to put $100,000 out in the community. And I didn't ask them why they called me. I've been doing this job 27 years. Hopefully my rep is good. And they came to me because they thought I would know what was happening on the ground. And what I'm referencing is kind of those conversations that I mentioned with Brotherhood of Elders or the Black Cultural Zone. And so I did know who was doing what. And after talking with them, I actually encouraged them to increase that 100,000. And we, I think, had a conversation maybe 2 weeks later, and they said, hey, we decided to more than double it. And so they gave out $225,000. And those 5 or 6 organizations, you know, were, I mean, to talk about the fact that they were excited about being able to follow up and get this money was incredible. But what it also meant was that I was in a position to play a role of identifying credible organizations to get funding. And then they asked me to play the re-grantor role, which got us 10% of that money, which was great, but that was not my incentive. And oftentimes in building power, you're really doing it based upon demonstrating your values, looking out for others as much as yourself. You know, because we're, oh, and excuse me, and then one interesting thing that happened was that Alameda County's Office of Public Health realized that in this process, they did not have a campaign or a communication plan for high schoolers, for young people. And it's usually when you're in a crisis that you realize what you don't have, right? And where East Oakland Youth Development Center is located is the hot spot. There's all kinds of news out there talking about these heat-seeking maps that say this is where the most dangerous place for COVID is. And so people are wanting to kind of throw money at it. So then May 25th happened. George Floyd was killed and all hell broke loose. Next slide. And so because we were in a pandemic and disenfranchised communities, which were already hurting, were just crystallized in terms of their pain, unemployment, poor health, people trying to, find food to eat, schools are closed, people who are essential workers have no child care. And then this further spotlight on George Floyd, which really kind of lifted for everyone just how poorly Blacks are treated, and specifically Black males. And so in this midst of the pandemic, everybody's watching because they're sitting still, they're at home. And the shame that people felt in seeing this was really horrific. And so what ended up happening was many of those same funders that wanted to come to the rescue for COVID wanted to support organizations that work in and around social justice. it was an incredible outpouring. There were marches, and we were already doing a lot of positive identity formation work and steeped in having taught our kids for 20 years how to self-advocate. And, you know, marching is one of those ways, right? So we were able to make the pivot and lift up what it is that EOYDC does, primarily for Black and Brown populations, because that's the audience that we unapologetically serve. And so we've listed a link here to an ABC News piece. But here's another part about building power. When you have an opportunity, you can guide it and direct it and build it however you want. So we had actually opened up our organization June 29th to serve our summer program. We could only serve a third of the people, but even that meant that we had about 128 folks. Point is that people need to understand what your focus is. And so when we got this blind call to cover, you know, what are you doing at the center, we focused on life skills, which is part of that incubator for identifying positive identity formation. And then we connected it with a march that one of our alums was leading, and he just so happens to be a new warrior. And then we contacted Steph and Clay, and they were at the march, and then it became this whole other thing. And so again, the way in which you communicate with your colleagues, with your funders, through news pieces, because you can help guide what message you want to have out there. It's also interesting about quote unquote taking risks. Even though we were following very restrictive CDC protocols, we were the only OFCY funded organization, as far as I know, I could be wrong, that were doing a hybrid program, meaning we were doing something in person and we were also doing stuff on Zoom. Because social and emotional support is like the key component for us, reaching out and touching, which of course you can't touch, that connection is still really, really important. And so when we look at being experts in our field, go to the next slide, please. What we're trying to share is that we're in business, but we're caring about safety first. So demonstrating for everyone that we are serious about the face mask, that you're seeing a series of pictures. On the far right, these are some of our young people who were doing the Alameda County Mask On Challenge. It also gave them an opportunity to make money, which was really awesome. But they were all socially distanced. And what we wanted to do was ensure that, because young people seem to be least informed around how serious COVID was, and you might remember I said that the Alameda County Office of Public Health realized that that was a gap in their communications. We wanted to support them in modeling that young people do take wearing masks seriously. They were giving out resources for free. And of course, like I said, you know, a lot of young people were losing their opportunities to make money. And so this was over a weekend and they were able to make money. And then the picture on the left was one of the giveaways. We were giving out educational supplies, and the census folks were also working with them. So we kind of put it all together and then made sure that community people could pick up whenever they wanted. The next slide, please. So again, when we talk about building power, you're also demonstrating that you have expertise in your field. And so what we did was we published a learning brief based upon our experience over the summer. we showcased what we were doing and who we were reaching. And I cannot tell you how many funders were just salivating at this, because again, there's no best practice out here. So whatever we're doing to share our learnings, it has value. And it wasn't just for our funders. Our colleagues appreciate it as well. You know, about 10 years ago, we actually started doing work on community engaged participatory action research. And we were doing it because we wanted to be recognized as doing excellent work in the field. And oftentimes research is one of those things where, you know, if it's in the book, if it's in the documentation, then you can look up EOIDC and it, you know, comes up all over the place for a lot of different things. And so we wanted to provide this primarily for an educational purpose. And then similarly with the community engaged research, whether it's around identity formation, hood disease, resilience, being part of the research means that you have more depth of understanding. And you may decide never to do research, it's okay. But what we looked at through that experience was that it paid off in spades. We had journal articles, we had our young people that had become young researchers, and we really believe that our young people are subject matter experts of their own experience, much like you as nonprofit leaders are subject matter experts as well. And again, the depth of your value of your knowledge and then how you share it then builds somebody else's capacity as well. And that's all about power. Go to the next slide, please. These were safety measures that people could, again, take some hints from, because, you know, now this learning brief can be a beginning of what is best practice. And it makes people more comfortable in your knowledge because you can kind of show proof points. After what we learned during the summer, with schools not going back in play, we decided to create our own community school. We're operating with kids from 8:30 to 5. Now again, we have fewer young people, but it means that more funders are willing to provide support for that very necessary service. Next slide. So what's the short term and the long term? That is for you to decide. But what we have done is continue to stay engaged with our funders and continue to participate in all of these supportive nonprofit resource groups. And it takes a lot of work. I mean, we even did some Facebook parties around COVID, around testing. You know, we try to be really, really creative, and we were able to get money for that. Now, when you look at long term, we have no idea how long COVID is going to go. You know, people are saying summer of 2021, some people are saying 2022. So in terms of trying to get whatever your recipe is for, you know, looking out to when you return to quote unquote normal, whatever normal looks like, as long as you're able to communicate to those folks that really want to be supportive, then you have the power to press on. Now, we're gonna have some questions in a minute, but if you've heard nothing, whether you're an introvert, an extrovert, whether you've been in the game a year or more than 10, power is the same. It's all about relationship, it's all about hard work ethic, and it's about the quality of your engagement. Next slide, please. So we're going to get ready to answer a bunch of questions, but if for some reason we don't get to yours, feel free to email me at regina@eoidc.org, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I meet with individuals and organizations all the time. I feel like it's just a part of when you've been in the work for a long time. It's a part of your extra servant leadership quota. I think that we are going to go to questions now, or I'm not sure if I also want to let you know that we are going to have another session in December, on December 8th, and that session will focus on communication. So if you liked what you heard, hopefully you'll come back. So I want to thank you very much for listening, and we are ready to get to your questions.
Hi, everyone. Feel free to enter any questions that you might have using the Q&A function that you'll find either at the bottom or the top of your screen, and we'll just address your questions as they come in. Regina, the first question is from Kelly Thompson of ED of Carl B. Medayer Center for Family Counseling. Please confirm that this recording will be available to the participants after this webinar. We have been providing free family counseling in Deep East Oakland for 40+ years and are providing our services via telehealth. And I would like to explore these ideas with my management and staff. Thank you.
So Kelly, thank you very much. I knew Carl Metoyer and the Metoyer family, and I know that you guys are doing outstanding work. Yes, I have been told that the recording will be available. It may take a couple of days, and we should get you looped in with the Black Cultural Zone and the People's Briefing, the health briefings that are going on, to make sure that you're getting all of the information that should be kind of floating downhill. It's amazing how much we work in silos, and especially during this pandemic. So we've got to be able to share the information. And if I can open up some connections for you, or reconnect, or what have you, I'm happy to do that.
Another question reads, hello, how much of part should parents or caretakers be involved when working with children?
You know, that's a great question. And it was really interesting when we opened the facility, because we would not let parents in. One of the things is, as an organization, I was requiring my staff to test monthly, but we could not necessarily force our kids to test. So we wanted to keep adults out. And that's not the question that you asked, but I wanted to also shine a light on it. And so we endeavor to engage parents and involve parents and caretakers as much as possible, so that, one, they understand what it is we're doing with their kids, but also how we're doing it. So for example, in the past, we've had, you know, cousins, two sets of cousins that may live together, and then maybe they want to physically fight because that's what they do at home. Well, we don't allow that here. And we have trained our staff in positive discipline. So as a part of sharing with parents and caretakers how best to be effective and how to ensure that their kids will be able to stay here, that kind of education is really important. And we often find that, like if there's a cooking class, we have our kids go home and teach their parents or caretakers how to do the cooking, you know, because we'll get questions from the parents. Well, can we come into the class? It's like, no, it really is focused on the youth, but allow your young person to lead you, to share with you, to do for you, and consider that a great bonding opportunity. So the question of how much should they be involved when working with children? I mean, we don't let parents come on field trips because we are responsible for their safety. So we do some seminars and workshops, but I would say the most important part is the communication piece. So if I were to share that we communicate, you know, like 50%, we do a lot we over communicate, but some of the disciplines and structures are not in place at home. And we're trying to correlate that what we're doing here can actually help home too. I'm hoping that answers your question. Okay, what
For
are my
you.
suggestions when encountering youth with behavioral problems, but they have tons of potential? I live in a potential zone. I love kids with potential. um, so part of the behavioral issues that you have to figure out, you know, are they diagnosed, or is this a child that had lots of trauma, because our staff is trained in trauma informed care. So you have to determine, one, whether you have the capacity and the understanding to engage them, or if someone else would be better doing that. I find that, again, in homes, there often isn't a lot of structure and discipline. And so once you introduce it, while they might initially balk at it, then they see everybody else kind of having fun, and it's like, oh, well, I guess I can do this. And that's including, cursing, fighting, eating sunflower seeds. I mean, all kinds of things that we just don't really allow here. But what I would say is, give them an opportunity, give them a responsibility. Share with them how important it is and what it is that you need. So for an example, when our kids go on field trips, I don't care where it is, to a Warriors game, on a college tour, on a visit to Apple, I make them write a reflection. Now, the back door is, I want them to write better. But that's their way of saying thank you, and I want to know what they're thinking. Now, if I don't get a reflection from them, they don't go on anything else. But it's a fairly easy opportunity, and we support them in helping them with their writing, helping them with their thoughts. So it really kind of depends on you in terms of what capacity you have to reach them, and whether this is a diagnosed issue that may need lots of counseling support, or if it needs medication, or, so that's probably more of a conversation offline. Thank you. So Tafara Singleton, one of my fellow police commissioners now, did we have any experiences after COVID and uprisings for racial justice that demonstrated a less than favorable relationship with funders? Did anyone pull away? How did you deal with that? So for me, nobody pulled away that I can tell. Now, when we're in the midst of it, sometimes quiet voices are not as loud because you're busy dealing with all the loud voices, right? But I will tell you that I had several funders that were more engaged because of the social justice piece and or the police commission piece. And they were like, well, this isn't a regular question, but can I ask it anyway, kind of thing. And I'm an open book. So I try to say yes to everything. And I try to challenge them to question their own implicit or explicit bias. So when they ask me a question, oftentimes I ask them the same question right back. Well, what do you think about X? Well, what do you think about it? And then I'll hear them and I'll say, hey, that's actually a very good point. I'd like for you to consider this as well. So, and we're in an interesting time where people are kind of having to face what getting comfortable being uncomfortable looks like, and maybe for the first time. And so I think it is really incumbent upon us, again, as nonprofit experts, to educate our partners, educate our funders, because they don't know what they don't know any more than kids don't know what they don't know. And as soon as you provide exposure, experience, a great story that brings them around, then it's like, oh my goodness, you've given me a gift that I didn't even know I needed. So hopefully that answers your question. Are there any other questions? Any pointers for social media content when it comes to wanting to appeal to our youth and our funders at the same time? Okay, so there is not a quick fix. And quite frankly, there are different platforms for different messages, as much as different graphics or infographics for the different entities. So what I would say is, you can't get a twofer there, but if it's really, really cute and still informative, then it may serve both audiences. So I'll give you an example. We did some social distancing posts as well as some healthy posts that give people an idea of how can I be healthy and still be safe, or what things are important while my child is at home around social distancing, but also studying and being on the computers. And so we used pictures of kids engaging in tech or art or what have you, and said, hey, every 30 minutes, it's really important to take a break. Or we had this one 4-year-old who we did a little video, and she said, wash your hands. And, and our high schoolers thought, oh, that was great. And they actually started washing their hands. I mean, they told me that stuck for them. And whatever's cute for kids will typically also resonate with some adults, because the messaging is the same. It's how you deliver it and on what platform. So most kids are on Instagram or TikTok. We don't have a TikTok, but we are on Instagram, but we're also on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. And as young people grow up, they tend to bleed over into other platforms as well. So I'm hoping that is helpful. But, the more creative you can be, if something motivates you or perhaps motivates your child, then there's a good chance that if you lift that into a graphic, it's going to impact someone else and motivate them. I think that we've been told we do a pretty good job. So take a look at our stuff. EOIDC is on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Any pointers on how to get and use testimonials from the community you serve as well as your employees? So this is an outstanding question. I got asked by another nonprofit, how do you know where all your kids are? And I said, we kind of built it like you bake a cake. It was part of an ingredient that we wanted them to stay in contact with us, that we expected them to continue to serve and to reach out and touch younger people, come back, share skills and expertise, share the lessons that you learned. And so you have to make it an intentional expectation. And when you're partnering, get them to write you a letter of support. And for employees, we started this thing called Feature Friday, and we asked our employees to tell us what they like about working here, and then we feature them. So it's intentional, it's with purpose, and it's authentic. It's not cool for you to show up 5 minutes before a grant is due and say, hey, can we put you in the grant? And we've gotten that too. And sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. But again, like relationship, you're always building your power platform. And the day that you need to, quote unquote, withdraw from the bank account of all things great, you want to make sure that you've already made some deposits before you withdraw. So, and you want to give as much as you get. And that's why that whole sharing the expertise and keeping funders informed, that's the give. And then the get is their money, is their invitations to luncheons, is their, I'm going to pay for you to do this coaching program. I mean, because they can do all those things. I had a funder send me to a Harvard executive education program for leadership. Shout out to Jamie Allison at Haas Foundation. But the point is, I never even knew that was possible. It's all about relationship. Any other questions? If somebody who posed a question has another question, you can come on back. We've got 7 more minutes. I'm all yours. Ayana, while we're waiting, are there any questions that, given your diverse background with OUSD and everything, is there a question that you might think might be of interest? Oh, when you first started your organization, how did you get the word out to the community? So I didn't start the organization, even though I'm old as dirt with it. The organization is now 42 years old, and I've been a part of it for about 37. But I came in at a kind of a bad time. So the organization had expanded into all of these different initiatives: substance abuse, hospital counseling, juvenile diversion programs. And so when I came in, I was trying to meet with people, and because there had been so much turmoil and kind of a revolving door of leaders, I literally got told, if you're still there in a year, we'll meet with you. So that was hard. So some of what I did was I cut the budget. I cut 42.5 staffers down to 12. And then in 6 weeks, I created 3 new programs: cooking, computers, and track. And with that, I made relationships, power relationships with the media, got them to cover it, and then that's how the word got out to community. There's always a method to your madness. And so I realized early that I needed someone to tell my story. And who better than the media, because they have such a broad exposure network. But the other thing is, the kids will go home and they will tell their friends and their parents. And when people are happy about something, they talk about it. And those kids have turned out to be the professionals that I employ here. 70% of my professional staff are alumni. And for the ones that, we couldn't hire everybody, but for the ones that have gone out into the world, we feature them on our Workforce Wednesday focus, which celebrates them and their work. And again, it says they are connected and they stay connected. Any other questions? We have 5 more minutes. So let me also say that as a part of the Generation Thrive content here, as they continue to roll out, there may be some opportunities to get some lessons on videography, on storytelling. I will certainly be sharing some of my best lessons in our next session focused on communication. But some of my best videos were shot by the Warriors Foundation. So if you can build into some of your grants that you need money for communications, that's big. I know that I had a funder, gosh, this was about 10 years ago. And initially they paid for my staff training to do our logic model and our theory of change, because, all those kind of buzzwords were not ones that we had a lot of training in. And then once we completed that, we went back to them and said, hey, now that we've got this, would you fund a strategic plan? And by the way, as a part of the strategic plan, what we want to do is update our website, and we need a video. And then at the 9th inning of the strategic plan, I decided that I was going to do a master plan and expand the building, renovate and expand it. Now, I was crazy to do all that, but it worked out because that funder said yes. And every time we completed a project that they were pleased with, they reinvested. And then they started sending the graduate students and doctoral students, which is how we started doing the community engaged research. These relationships go deep and they go broad. You know, when you are doing the dance, you are not dating just to date. You're dating to get married. You're dating to, and you know, I don't know what you all think about marriage, but you're looking to have long-term relationships. And there are a lot of funders that really want that. We have just 3 more minutes. Any more questions? This has been really exciting for me, and I hope that you have enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to, you know, reconnecting with some of you all on December 8th. And hopefully you will tell your friends and get them to come too. And then I will also let you know that there's a whole nother platform that's being developed for educators. Certainly some of the lessons that we learn in nonprofit are transferable, but there are also some that are very specific for educators in the field. And so I hope that you will tell your friends and so on and so on. Generation Thrive will probably post the link on their LinkedIn and their Facebook. And then of course, if you look me up, I'm on everything, Regina Jackson, Regina Oak, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook, and I'll be posting it as well. Thanks, Michelle, for the compliment. Clinical training program for graduate students. I'd like to know more about how to involve undergrads and high school students involved in getting experience at our agency in the form of internships. That sounds like an offline conversation, but happy to talk about it. And then if you could please sign up for Generation Thrive programming, www.nba.com/warriors/Generation Thrive. And I think we are just about out of time. For this last 30 seconds, Kelly, in terms of involving undergrads, I think that connections with the colleges in terms of those specific study areas, those students that are majoring in areas that have to do with, you know, public health or you know, whatever ancillary entities. And then high school students, you know, there are high schools that also have these academies. So health academies or what have you make sense to you. I think that all schools are requiring service hours. So that may be a way to start. Again, want to say thank you to everyone. We are at an end. Appreciate Generation Thrive. Ayana, you are phenomenal. Thank you for this opportunity. And hopefully we'll see you December 8th at 10. Thank you.